Good morning. We will pay attention to the periodic inventory system and when the FIFO method of inventory valuation is used. Now remember, with the periodic inventory system, you don't have to calculate the value of your inventory every time when goods are purchased or sold, and you don't have to calculate cost of sales during the year. So at the end of the year, you will calculate what is the value of your closing inventory, and you will do a calculation to determine what is the cost of sales. With the FIFO method, it means the first things that we bought, first out will be sold first. So if we start selling, we will start selling the things that we purchased in the previous year already, then the next purchases, then the next purchases. And that means the cost of sales will be included in all these amounts purchased at the beginning of the year. The closing inventory will consist of those items that we buy at the end of the year. Okay, so the first question, they ask, calculate the value of your closing stock. So it means that I will start with the last purchases because that will be included in my closing stock. They give you the closing stock as 39 units. So I will start and I will say that the 15 units that we purchase at 221 will still be in my stock. And that will give me 3,315. Okay, then I must remember that I've got 39 units left over. So I'm going to take that 39 units and I subtract the last ones, the 15, to see how many units did I take out of the second last purchases. So out of that purchases, we also sold 24 units. So I will take the 24 and I will multiply it with a purchase price there of 231. And that will give me 5,544. So if I add this, it will give me the value of my closing inventory, and that is 8859. Okay, so remember, your closing inventory will include all the items that were sold or purchased last, right at the end of the year, and if you have more left over, it will be from the previous time. Okay, the second question, they ask you to calculate the cost of sales. Now, you can do this calculation in two different ways. So I'm going to do both calculations so that you can see, if the information is not given so much in detail, how you can also calculate it. Okay, so I'm going to take the 24 units, the 32, the 55, but remember 5 of that was returned, so we only had 50 left over there. So I can go and I can say that my opening inventory, they give me the value. And they say the opening inventory is 5,040. Okay, in question 1, we calculated the closing inventory. They give me the total purchases. So the purchases is that 35713. So I can show that the total amount that we purchased was 35713. They gave me all the information to do the calculation of the closing inventory. So I can subtract this closing inventory that I calculated, the 8,859. So my opening inventory plus purchases less the closing inventory will give me 31,894. And that would then be the cost of sales of all the things that I've already sold. Now, sometimes it's not so easy to do this calculation, so I'm going to do the other calculation as well, so that you can just see how we can calculate the cost of sales in another way. Okay, now remember, for the cost of sales, the first things that we buy, we sold first. So first of all, that 24 will be sold. So I will show 24 units times 210, and that will give me 5,040. Okay, then we will sell the first purchases, the 32 that we paid 218. So 32 units times 218 gives me 6,976. After that, I'm going to sell the next purchases from March. But remember, I returned 5, so I can only sell 50 out of those units that cost 222. So 50 units times 222 gives me 11,100. Okay, now I must determine how many units will I sell out of the next purchases. Our total number of units that we sold was 144. Okay, so of that 144, we've taken 24 out of the old stock, 32 out of the first purchases, and 50 out of the next purchases. And that means there is then 38 left over. So after I sold all the ones in the first purchases, I took 38 units out of the 62 to determine what is the cost price. So 38 times the 223. And that will give me 31,894. So that is my cost of sales. Now I will get exactly the same figure as the one that we calculated there. In this case, I just did the calculation in a different way, and I looked at the first sales will be out of the ones that we had left over at the end of the previous year. Then the first purchases will be sold first, then the second purchases will be sold second, and then we will have to determine how many of the third purchases will we actually sell to calculate the cost of sales. Okay, if we want to do the weighted average method, it means that now I don't work with a first in, first out. They don't care whether they sell the old goods or whether they sell the new goods. So what they do is they take the total cost and they divide it by the number of units at the end of the year, and they determine what is the weighted average, what is the average price of all these goods. Okay, so I'm going to take that 5,040 plus the 35713. And if I divide it, I must determine how many units did we get for that money. We had 24 and we purchased another 159. So it means I will take the 24 plus the 159. If I add up my total cost, it will give me 40,753. The total number of units that we purchased was 183. Okay, when I work out this average price, I will get 222.69 for one item. Okay, our closing inventory is 39. So I will take in the weighted average, the 39, multiply it with the average price, and that will give me 8684.91. In this question, they didn't ask you to calculate the cost of sales, but I just want to calculate the cost of sales as well, because I want to explain the difference between the two methods to you. So my sales was 144 units. So I take the 144 units and I multiply it with this average price of 222 Rand and 69 cents, and that gives me 32,062. Now, if we look at the answers, you can see that the closing stock in the FIFO method is 8,859. The closing stock in the weighted average is lower. What is the reason for that? In the FIFO method, the closing stock includes the purchases at the end of the year when the price was higher that we paid. So that is a better method, because the price that they give you there will be more or less, when you have to buy new stock, it will be in this order and it will not be at the price at the beginning of the year. The average price is lower because they don't work with per unit. They go and they work out an average. So because the opening prices were cheaper than the later prices, it means that the average price is lower and you will show your closing inventory at a lower figure. If we look at the cost of sales figure, when the FIFO method is used, it is 31,894. When the weighted average is used, it is 32,062. So it means here the cost of sales is higher because the last goods that was purchased, that was the high price, is now included in the average price. So when the prices go up every time when we buy, the closing inventory in the FIFO method will always be higher than the one in the weighted average method, because this is an average of the whole year's prices, and those are the prices of the goods that we bought last in the year, at the end of the year. The cost of sales will always be lower because we sell the cheaper goods first, and in the weighted average, the cost of sales will then be higher.